next meeting, plan committee.
Thought I was ready. Al Yaplin,
Here.
Paul Byer,
Here.
Tina Berger, Alicia Chi. Abe Estrella is excused. Dirk Foreman,
Here.
Anthony Garcia is excused. Susie Garrettson.
Actually, I just saw him joining.
Oh, did he make it? Sure, we promote him.
Here.
Thanks, Anthony. So, Robert, I got Susie, right? Is that where I stopped before?
Yeah,
Okay. Robert Hamilton,
I'm here.
David Hayward. Michelle James excused. Julie Lead is on her way but not here, so I'll let you know when she joins. Rick Miller.
Here.
Tom Pearson.
Here.
Is Walter Phelps on? Kim Robinson. No. John Van Landingham.
Here.
Diane Vosick. Here. Al White is excused, and is Christy Zeller on? Yeah. Okay. That's all.
Would anyone like to do the land acknowledgement?
I'll do it.
The city of Flagstaff humbly acknowledges the ancestral homelands of this area's indigenous nations and original stewards. These lands, still inhabited by native descendants, border mountains sacred to indigenous peoples. We honor them, their legacies, their traditions, and their continued contributions. We celebrate their past, present, and future generations who will forever know this place as home.
Thank you. Ready.
This is the big chapter night. So we're reviewing the growth and land use chapter with you all tonight. Just kind of, it's interesting as we've been starting this week, we've already started pulling the whole document together to send out for review. And even though this is the last chapter you're reviewing, we sent you the introduction with it because we've decided it's actually going to be the first chapter of content. Like, so the way the document's going to be organized is chapter 1 will be that briefing intro chapter. Chapter 2 will be the how does the plan work and identify major and minor plan amendments and how to use the rest of the documents. And then the growth and land use chapter, and then we're going to stack all the other chapters after. So we've sort of been reviewing them in reverse order, which has been interesting to think through. This particular chapter has been not only reviewed by staff and the committee members that wanted to, we did send it out to some of the property owners who've been working with us closely on development cases in terms of asking for some spot reviews on it. And we did send some of those out to them this week as well. When your packet went out, we made sure they also got the packet. I don't think you got any formal comments from any of those individuals, but we kind of heard a little bit back, and I will try and like offer what they have shared verbally. They just haven't had time to look at the whole thing. But we did try and get some of those property owners as we're talking about greenfield development in particular and what it might mean to weigh in a little bit. So staff has some thoughts to share from them and from some other property owners who are kind of paying attention or asking questions. And we've shared a little along the way. We've been working on this chapter really for like 5 weeks, right? So it's been, and before that, working on the map all the way since April. So as we've been working on all these later chapters, this one's been coming along too. Big kudos to Elsa for getting a lot of this mapping done. I know everybody got the interactive map, but we also put up 2 scaled maps on the wall over there, which I think you can see on camera, but we will, we can share the interactive map during this conversation also and around. So I think when the chair and I talked this week, I think there's some key parts of the text, probably not you, the other part, the chair. The thing stuck in the chair over there. Oh, good. Walter just joined, by the way.
It's strange. You look strange just talking to chairs.
No, but I think there are some key parts of the text we will want to discuss tonight, but I would like to also have us look at if you have any comments on the map. And we can take some time to explore the draft. Any other comments from staff? Elsa's gonna share her screen and we'll get diving into this then.
Righty, guys, I think we'll do it kind of, the same way as we have been, starting out with the preamble, I think, as John has christened it. Kind of talk through any questions, comments, or concerns you guys have about that, and then move into the goals and policies. And I think, like Sarah said, in this preamble, the descriptions of the various district kind of, not districts.
Categories.
Land use categories, okay. Right, the descriptions of the various centers, right? So if you're a rural center, a suburban center, the corridor or whatever, I think are kind of, I want to say more important, but closer to kind of code in terms of their interpretation, as opposed to just being introductory material, right? So when staff is looking at a zoning application, they will be referring to these descriptions in these tables, saying, okay, well, does your proposed development, kind of meet what we're describing here? So I think I want to spend a little bit more time on that than maybe we have spent on some of the other introductory stuff. So anyone want to kick us off with any questions or comments about this piece?
So Andy, Michelle's comments that came through, I don't know. I kind of worked with her on those a little bit. Do you want to talk about each one individually or?
I think if anybody, I shared them with everyone today. If there's any of them people want to talk about, great. Some of them were just like, make sure this is clarified. And so I don't think we need to talk about ones like that. So I don't know if there's any in particular you think, if you worked on them with her, do you have ones you'd want particularly to have us talk about? Sorry, we have a few people still joining. Just so you know, Alicia and Kim and Walter are now all in the meeting. Yeah, I will bring an extra copy of them if you want to. They're just like, yeah. But we can also just talk through them, whichever you want.
Yeah, if anyone wants to take a look at those and see if there's any of those that you want to discuss in more detail, these are the comments that Michelle provided in writing because she wasn't able to be here tonight. So I guess we're kind of treating it as public comment. Sure.
Yeah, I mean,
I
it's a thorough review, so I don't have anything that jumped out at me as being, but some of them were more like questions posed to the group, right? Like the one where she talked about, the University District maybe needs medical included in it if we're going to include FMC in that for the map. But then she also said maybe we could deal with it a different way. So ones like that, I'm willing to hear what everyone has to say about it. Yeah, and Elsa just pulled it up on screen.
I'd start off with that maybe sort of a question then. How would you describe the major differences between the corridors and the center?
I think the corridors are more commercial focused than the centers. Like centers are like mixed use is the definite preferred. And in commercial centers, we're pushing for commercial first, and then if there's housing availability options, we don't necessarily not have them, but in corridors, yeah. Yeah, and I also think the corridors are gonna be a lower intensity. Drive through. Yeah, and more, they allow a lot more things like drive through, especially in urban centers. Since the focus is on the pedestrian environment, typically you want fewer like drive-through conveniences because you want to be prioritizing pedestrian and not having as many what they call like conflict zones with vehicles where there's opportunities for pedestrians to be struck. So there's some differences, especially in like how automotive oriented they are. So corridors are more automotive oriented than centers are essentially.
Feels like that needs to be made more clear then. I understand that when you say it, it makes sense, and it's kind of what I intuited, but I had to intuit it. It wasn't there right off the bat. When we look at the set of framework guidelines, I mean, I'm using the urban one as an example, right? Because it's easy to compare it across. They feel like the framework guidelines are relatively similar. And I don't emphasize those differences enough that you're talking about.
Okay.
It's a general note. Susie?
One of Bill's is on page 12, the first bullet, using the term affordable housing. There's a question. We got a memo that says you want to use attainable housing rather than affordable housing.
Yeah, in this chapter. So I think I saw that and I think it was that's just a thing we didn't get changed over.
Difference in meaning.
Jennifer's here. Yes, I'll let her answer.
Yeah, well, I mean, everybody, uses the term affordable in their own way, but we were trying to differentiate affordable or designate the term affordable housing in this plan for like federally, like income restricted units. Affordable housing in the very formal sense where it is restricted, who gets to live there, what they're paying. There's some subsidy involved. So like a very formalized, it's true affordable units, rather than just residential units that are affordable to the general workforce in the more like informal sense. So we use that word attainable. Just kind of it's not always my favorite word, but I think I hope it is clear to people the difference. Like once we are, however, we're indicating in the plan that a term is defined somewhere, it can go. And I don't know if I made a point to specifically define attainable. We certainly can.
We should probably make sure we do. in the
Yeah,
definitions.
yeah.
Good idea, because it's not, that's affordable. I have an intuition of what that means, but
Right.
attainable.
Attainable, it's just, yeah, it's just kind of, it's geared toward working people who are living, or within a certain, we could put an income range on it. A lot of people use like middle income, housing is becoming it's gaining a lot of traction because people who are median, average income earners throughout the country have a hard time affording market rate housing. So we could attach an AMI range to it, like around like 80% AMI to 120% AMI or something like that.
First down, there's middle income is different, right? So it's people that have jobs or two household kind of thing. And then if you put an income on there,
It's true. It kind of, we don't want to be excluded. That's where it all comes, like when you're using the word affordable housing, it's very specific to certain income levels and certain programs and all that. So when we are relying on this really kind of fluffy word attainable for the workforce, I don't want to be excluding anybody by putting an income range on it necessarily. Because frankly, there's people at twice the median income in this town that
absolutely.
would cringe at some prices, right? So, and we don't want to not name them and only name others. So that might be we can do some research on like best practices for how to describe attainable workforce housing. I think workforce is like a really accepted common term we keep hearing nationally. But of course, we don't want to be excluding like someone who's retired or who isn't necessarily working.
Can I comment on attainable housing?
Anthony.
Oh, go ahead, Anthony. I wasn't sure who that was. Scott.
Oh, okay. As long as you guys can hear me. There's also like an implication that attainable means like without help from, let's say, a government agency or a nonprofit, you are able to attain a house. And it might not be the desired house of your choice. It might be the only one in that price point range as a workforce person that you can get into, just to add a little bit of context and color to that phrasing.
Another one of Michelle's on page 12, that second bullet talks about public space. And she was wondering about the difference between that and activated public space.
Sure, and I do have a
Same.
definition for activated.
You do-
Like, activated means that like there's particular like programming and there's activities that are like meant to keep the space occupied, especially in like downtown and some central places. There's concern sometimes in these denser settings that if you have a public space that's not managed or programmed, that it becomes more of a nuisance than an asset. So
What's an example of it activated?
like Heritage Square is activated.
And if I could add some color to that, DBA activates Heritage Square with events and programming many days a week, whether it's musicians or Kids Squared or lunch series or all sorts of stuff, which adds vibrancy and invites the community in. When it's not programmed, it sometimes becomes a magnet. Back to the phrase, nature abhors a vacuum. It'll fill it with something. And if it's not intentionally filled, sometimes how it otherwise gets filled is not desirable. Or even neutral, it's just there and empty.
Yeah, I did, someone else brought that up and I did write up a definition for what an activated.
Just going through these.
Are there other comments on the table? Images or anything else in this chapter people want to remark on? I wonder what folks think of the kind of cartoonish bubble images. We had a ton of internal discussion about what should images that are not just photos of the community look like.
I really like them because they make it really clear that it's like, this is just a visualization of what we've put in words, right? This isn't like, you're not gonna go build that,
No.
right? As it was like all cardboard cutouts. So it's kind of, it's clear in a way that, that I prefer it a lot more, like the AI generated stuff that we had before, which is kind of like, you could look at that and say, well, what you're proposing to build doesn't look like this, so it's not right. Whereas in
I
this
wanted
case,
to comment.
Yes.
No, Anthony?
Oh, sorry. But so what I'm understanding though is like we're trying to build, basically, more density and higher up stuff. Yeah, more like that, I guess. But like the reality of this is we're going to be hiding that mountain quite a bit. So are we lying to ourselves by leaving the mountain in there? Like the reality, it seriously is that we are going to hide everything that we now cherish from our streets. Not to be like over the top with this, but it's true.
I mean, when we did like a visual analysis on Milton Road, Anthony, which we did kind of like right after we adopted the last regional plan, one of the things we found was that these larger buildings, yes, sometimes they can block a view, but sometimes they can frame a view. So it's not always one way or another. But yeah, like there is a cost to going up, which is some of the viewpoints change. But we've also done a ton of research that we don't have any way to legally protect viewpoints that are from private property. We can.
Yeah, I'm not,
Open spaces. And so I hope when we read the plan cover to cover that we didn't give people a false impression, because I feel like the last plan left a lot of people with a very false impression that the city has some authority to protect views from a piece of private property to something we admire or want to see, where that wasn't realistic. And so I feel like some of the frustration was the lack, like the poor expectations we set up that we actually couldn't meet.
I agree, and I'm not combating the case at all. I just want us to be as real as possible when it comes to the visualizations of this. If we don't start letting people know what we're talking about by this new development style, then they're going to continue thinking that the way Flagstaff is now is how it's always going to look, and that's just not the reality of what we're proposing.
So in terms of the visualization, right, if you look at the images we have up on the screen, you move the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-story building to the back, so it actually
Starts blocking the view.
Just a little bit, maybe. I don't know. It's just an idea.
Or you
Thanks,
move the
guys.
3-panel building up so that it starts to block the view a little bit. Maybe that's another way to approach it.
Yeah, but I like the way that you have that little mini plaza there. Anyone else got anything else on this preamble section?
I still have a few more.
Go for it.
Okay.
We can jump around.
Okay. On 14 and 16, under urban corridors, the 1/5 bullet. Okay, you use the word, the end of the sentence that says uses on active transportation facilities. I just wondered what that meant. What is an active transportation?
So we have what we call the active transportation master plan. And so we do have a definition. The active transportation is walking, biking, micro mobility devices, essentially. And there were places in the past plan, we used the term multimodal, and even in the transportation chapter that we reviewed last time, staff has started to lean towards using active transportation more consistently. So one, we're more consistent with master plan, and two, we're just getting more alignment with the other documents. So I think right now, staff seems to be, from the transportation group, seem to be leaning towards active transportation rather than multimodal, which active transportation does kind of leave out transit, which means we have to kind of talk about active transportation and transit, but that kind of seems to be the terminology direction. I find that transportation is like fire. It's like both of them like to rename the same thing over and over again a little bit and like keep repackaging it. And I can't tell you why. It's just something, those two fields kind of they bring up words in different ways over time.
So Sarah, this is Walter. Is there going to be a glossary that defines active transportation? And then even the other question, I'm still unclear what the consensus was on affordable housing or other terminologies that were also being suggested. So if the glossary clearly explains what those different terminologies mean, then I guess that would help to clarify what seems to be not clear right now. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure which definitions or which terminologies we're agreeing on.
Yeah, we have been kind of having a rolling list of definitions and identifying words we want defined as we go. And so we do have a definitions chapter or glossary that we've been compiling. In fact, Joe, who's the one up by the door today, is been compiling them. And so we would just add attainable and affordable workforce housing to maybe a portion where it's housing and people can see the subcategories. And then we work with Jennifer to make sure they're clearly defined.
I think that'd be helpful. It's definitely like a spectrum of that of need for sure. And so we should find that.
Yeah, the way I heard it, Walter, was that affordable housing is like attached to funding to support people in getting into housing, or that is controlling the price of housing so that people can afford it. Attainable housing is housing where your job plus what's available in your market means you can buy or rent something.
And subsidized.
And subsidized. And then affordable housing, or workforce housing is housing that might not be subsidized by your employer or by a workforce program. It could mean a lot of those kinds of things.
I mean, if it's such a conversation, this topic, like workforce housing needs and, retaining our workforce here, I'm sure. I don't remember which chapter was that.
Social and economic systems.
The SCS chapter, yes. So looking forward into the future, I would like to think, and I'm hopeful that we would have some sort of additional program to be, collaborating with employers in time to create new
Well,
programs.
usually if there's funding from HUD, let's just say CDBG or Housing and Urban Development funding for, areas that need input, and where either the state governments can secure grants, or maybe nonprofits can secure grants to develop those projects. It always goes back to the terminology that is used from the federal level, which is below medium or above medium. So medium being sort of like the threshold. So there's, 80% below medium or 120% above medium, those seem to be the typical, I guess, so that's the Fed's standards. The Feds use that standard. So I'm not sure. I'm just throwing that out for your consideration there.
Thanks, Walter.
We use the terminology workforce housing in one part of this chapter, which is under employment. The current employment category in our current regional plan does not really allow for housing at all. If you're in an employment area, you don't get to build housing. You can have what they call complementary commercial, which is kind of limited commercial. But we're actually providing some language that says if you have workforce housing tied to a specific employer in proximity to their workplace, it may be considered in all employment areas. So if Gore wants to build an apartment complex that's part temporary housing for people coming in and out of their campus and part permanent housing for people they want to support staying at their place of work, or the hospital maybe wants that because they have nurses that are coming in for 6 months at a time and people who are moving in, and they want to be able to provide that as a asset to their business. We've talked with the hospital a little and they've said, yeah, it would save us money to actually lose a little money on housing, but be able to retain people, because turning over a highly educated employee can be more expensive. So the economics of that could work out for an employer in such a way, and we'd want to be able to offer those opportunities maybe in the future, even though currently our zoning code wouldn't let you do that in the LI zone. That might be the kind of thing that could be right for code changes or one-off rezonings that don't match the compatibility list. So those are the kinds of things we did kind of think through a little bit as we were talking about housing. And maybe that's the distinction, is workforce housing is what you have in an employment area. Attainable housing is what you have in any neighborhood or urban or center. And then affordable housing is what we have programs to support in the communities.
That might end up being a better distinction.
Yeah, because I'm afraid if we tie it to AMI, it's so specific. And this doesn't regulate that. And we're just trying to describe what it is we're hoping to achieve. Like,
Right.
And that can make those definitions like,
Squishy, yeah.
yeah, if they're squishy and like the federal definition changes, we're okay. And if the federal definition changes and we've been tied to their old definition, then we're out of sync. You know what I mean? Everybody's language changes over time, and over 10 years, this has happened in the last plan a few times. So just something to think about. A good discussion, because the definitions are important. Any attorney will tell you the glossary of the land use plan is super important. And yeah, we're working right now with our writer editor to identify all these little inconsistencies in how things were developing over time. So we're cleaning that language up this week. So it's just a good discussion for us to capture too. So thank you. You guys want to move on to anything else? Go for it. Keep going. You're seeding from Michelle's points.
I'm no Michelle, but I'm doing my best. Employment districts on page 19, the last bullet about fencing. She wondered why fencing is included in other districts. Employment districts.
So it's included in
It's not included, sorry, I didn't.
The fencing, like,
limiting fencing and wildlife corridor. So the two categories of land use categories that were of concern to Arizona Game and Fish were employment and rural. Because there are places where we have employment and rural neighborhood that overlap significant wildlife corridors. And Game and Fish's request was to have a guideline about fencing in there. Even though we both the city and county currently don't have any restrictions on fencing. If you have private property, you can fence it. And so Dave asked us to try and work with identifying those areas and making sure that we don't have to go back in later and retrofit fencing. A lot of those areas today have no fencing. But if people started putting up chain link fences or, spiked barbed wire, we could see a lot of impacts to the wildlife that they are working to reconnect across roads and major.
Yeah,
areas.
they're doing it all over Downey Park. These people
Yeah.
are coming in from California and they're fencing their properties. There's
Mm-hmm.
actually a lot of it going on right now.
Well, if I could just clarify one thing on that. So the county does have fencing standards and it's over a certain. We do try to promote wildlife friendly fencing, particularly for projects that require approval that we know are impacting wildlife corridors. So we do have a standard for wildlife friendly fence. Yeah, so there are some that may not all be permitted.
do we have it listed
Just to say.
listed in rural?
Yeah, it's in rural neighborhood and it's in employment. So those two are where we find that language. And it was specifically because when you look at the map over there, those are the two categories that kind of are in the rural areas, right? There's some employment areas where you have like, landscaping and gravel and composting, and then and maybe like maybe a beef processing can fit out in those locations, or a lumber mill. But then you also have areas that are just rural housing.
So I understand that we can't, on private property, you're allowed to build, but I live in a neighborhood where the homeowners association, back when it was established, said no fences. And it's wonderful because it's no dogs. People take their dogs. And so I think we can still encourage homeowners associations to do that. And nobody in my neighborhood those conditions. So I'm sure if somebody built it, nothing would happen. Yeah, I would complain.
So that is why it's more narrowly focused, is because it's the way we identified things.
Another one.
On the point of employment districts, when I look at the employment district and the existing compatible zoning categories, it feels like it's R&D and industrial. It doesn't feel like there's room for other sort of person service uses that are also employment, right? I mean,
Light industrial does have office and retail as allowed use in it.
Work.
Yeah, that has live work. And the CH 10,000, is that the
Just
one?
commercial.
That's a commercial zone in the county too.
So the county has a commercial zone in there, but the city doesn't.
No, because all of our, almost all except heavy industrial, I think, allow a certain limited size of commercial within the city's existing zoning code. And that's why we kind of wrote that additional language, says commercial and residential zones when complementary to a primary zone in a master plan development may be allowed. We could change that language if you wanted it to be more flexible.
I'm just thinking, like, if you think of like a doctor's office, for instance, like that's very much, I mean, it's providing a service to the community, but it's also a center of employment for a decent number of people. It doesn't, just because it's not a factory, right?
Yeah, and those would be allowed in light industrial open, heavy industrial open, research and development, all allow offices. That's the nuance of, you have to know the code to know why. But yeah, I mean, if you think we're missing zones or you want us to think about rewording how we include other language in this table, we can do that. I should say the staff's thinking on this table is that if we had someone come in with a proposal, we would first look at the table and see if they're proposing something in one of the existing compatible zones. Like what you're proposing fit a zone that would be allowed where you are. And then we would look at all the discretionary. It's really key that we want to keep people moving in the direction the plan's going. We want to find a way to connect them to the zone. And over time, hopefully we would change these zones to be more compatible with like our future desired density. Knowing that it's not there today is like just a gap we are having to figure out how to recognize. Without telling people, oh, you're not over 50 dwelling units per acre, you can't rezone.
On that note, Sarah, almost like the same disclaimer should apply to the next column, right? In that also the existing zoning categories may not clearly align with the definitions.
I think the way we were trying to imagine this could be used is that if it doesn't align with the existing compatible zoning categories, then you really have to like very close scrutiny to what it is being proposed as and that it otherwise fits.
I mean, I'm more making the point that that we don't have great zoning categories, right? For instance, for urban center
Correct.
and urban corridor, and we need to come up with some.
Yeah, and at the bottom of that table, I wrote, this is not, let me make a preface, this has not been through legal review. But some other cities in Arizona have a process for administrative changes to their plan. And what I'd like this table to do, if legal agrees and we find a proper mechanism to do that, is that if we do a zoning code amendment, that ordinance for the zoning code amendment can update this table without having to go all the way through some separate plan amendment process, just to help this table and the zoning code at both the city and county stay current. But I've got it. That's one of those tricky things that we have to make sure we're doing it in a way that doesn't violate a state statute somehow. It might mean we need to update Title 11 that oversees. It might not be sufficient to put it here in the plan. We might also have to update the code overseeing plan amendments to make that workable. That's the part I haven't gotten through yet. I know. I mean, like, really, anybody want to sit in those meetings with me and Michelle?
Or instead of us.
It's good.
Do that too.
You guys get to reference 10.6.7, section A. Anyone else got anything on the preamble? Yeah, keep on going.
You started and then we'll hit all the related things and just keep going. How's that?
On page 20, the description for landscapes, Michelle writes, this introduction, and she liked the introduction, by the way. This introduction should also mention the additional benefits of parks, open spaces, and recreational lands, including all of the life benefits and the city's goal to have open space and recreational lands available within half a mile of every neighborhood. There is more, more importance, I guess, to open space.
Yeah, and we have a whole chapter that covers some of that, so maybe we can just have a couple sentences and then say, see
Yeah.
the prose chapter. Yeah. What did folks think of this new category of federal lands and working landscapes? Because our current plan has, what our current plan calls those areas is it says areas in white retain their existing entitlements, which tells you not much, right? So we thought, well, why did we say that? We said that because it's really complicated. In holdings in National Forest System lands usually need access and easements that take 10+ years to get through NEPA decisions in order to be developed. And so people come to us in the city and county and they'd like to have a rezoning case. And we're like, but we don't even know we could get any utilities to this property. Like the bigger hurdle is not us. If the federal government was pursuing it with you as a private property owner, then our part would be dependent on that. So when we talked about that, that kind of led to this federal lands and working landscapes to recognize that both in holdings to federal lands and federal lands that are covered by federal land management plans have this relationship that's not quite fully in the city and county's control.
I think what's a little confusing is that I think about the checkerboard south of town, and the way this is written, it doesn't really speak to land ownership other than private in the working landscape. And I think that there are other land uses out there.
There's state land for sure.
Other ownerships out there.
And state land department has looked at this language.
Uh-huh.
And they find that it's pretty comprehensive for those checkerboard areas of what they sometimes see proposed or are working with adjacent federal lands to do.
But it doesn't specifically, it gives the impression that those in holdings are private.
So should we say they're also state lands?
It's important.
And we have one big chunk of it, right? That's
About ready.
being identified as the
The
light.
University district that right here, which is, I believe, Camp Navajo. There are state lands.
The map, the piece that's south of like Country Club and stuff, and
That area, yeah.
there is
Yeah.
one piece of state land that's not entirely surrounded by other Forest Service stuff that's being designated as this like working landscape.
Are you talking about, maybe we have to go to the map really quick to get that. I think you're talking about section 20. What I would call it, like looking behind John if you're in the room. But there's the yellow-ish square of state land out on the way to Walnut Canyon. You can see the butt of the dinosaur, as I call the west side of Walnut Canyon. And there's the yellow square that is state land. And the other one I think you're talking about is to the south of that.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, that does have a ton of access issues. Even access into it, there's no way to access it from the adjacent rural land or from the suburban land to the north. So even though it like technically abuts, they would have to like buy a house and bulldoze it to get access off a local road. There's not a great way to get arterials and collectors out of there, which would be needed to develop a parcel that large. And so you couldn't even like catty corner off the Forest Service land without getting Forest Service permits to get in and out of there. Yeah. You need new roads, road access easements. Whenever somebody calls and they're looking at a property like that and they ask what the long-term outlook is, we say, you should go talk to the federal government first and get back to us. And then they never call again. And that's just realistically, how those things work, but that could change over time, right? Like the Forest Service could be getting different direction in 10 years and, told to open up more land for housing, and then that changes how things go. So that change in policy can be really informative on what can or can't happen there.
Interestingly, Senator Kelly has a bill that would allow for the leasing of federal land for biomass utilization and processing. So all of a sudden, we're seeing potential economic development, a lease on a federal land or you could say that working landscape purposes.
Yeah, to me, that really would fit a working landscape, because I could see someone applying for doing that on a Forest Service piece of land and the adjacent state land. Right? That could be something that could combine or be fit in a checkerboard setting.
If they're. You mean?
Yeah, they wanted to do highly different
150.
position.
Suzie, you want to keep going?
Yeah, keep going. All right, thanks.
21 under neighborhood, the second paragraph of that. First sentence of the second paragraph does not. Says.
I'll just pull it up, right?
It's a bit ugly.
I don't know how, if this region does all those things that it says, must allow a broad range of compact housing, blah, blah, blah. How does that ensure it'll be safe and convenient travel?
Will you just work on that sentence first?
Yeah, maybe that just doesn't go together.
Yeah, it doesn't. And then, okay, under page 22,
I would also say when I steal stuff from Google Maps, you have to really make sure. Oh, it's not obvious where it comes from.
Yeah.
I think this is a draft illustration. It's not a final.
What's the next one, Susie?
page 22 under urban neighborhoods. Okay. She writes, does the south side in it want industrial uses even if they were historically there?
Yes.
Okay. She thought in the plan for Sunnyside or south
South
side.
side. No, there's a part of the south side neighborhood where they do want to allow for light industrial uses. Like, think of like smaller light industrial uses. Like, we had a gentleman who wanted to teach blacksmithing classes out of his barn. We don't allow that in any residential zone. You cannot build the equipment to do blacksmithing. He needed a shop somewhere, or like, the cocoa op over on Kayabab Street has to be an industrial zoning because it's using equipment, makes a lot of noise, just like a cabinet shop does. So there are some of these things that some of the neighborhoods, south side, and sometimes I've heard from people in Sunnyside who also say, I don't mind that there's a plumbing business next door. Sometimes people mind and sometimes people don't, but not every neighborhood in the community has been without industrial uses internal to it through its history. And some people want that. Other communities call those like warehouse districts. It's really common. There's several in New Orleans. I'm going to Vancouver in next week, and they have a big neighborhood that's all about the fact that it's industrial and neighborhood tied together. And that is something historically that at least 2 neighborhoods and probably 3 or 4 actually in our community had that as a feature. Not everybody wants that separated. So,
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to that topic briefly. So in the Sunnyside neighborhood, a lot of the folks that live here also, they own their house, but that's really the only wealth that they have accrued. And sometimes they are, without jobs and things like that. So sometimes like, having that home business or having that zoning free to do other things than just have that house, like having a salon in their house or whatever, is super, super important to the folks that just have equity in their house but don't really have much else to work with. And the Sunnyside neighborhood really appreciates that and wants to embolden that every chance we get. And we hope that the plan definitely lends itself to that. Thank you.
This is my last one till we get to gold.
You feel like that one's resolved, that the answer is yes, from neighborhood plan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so, page 24, rural neighborhoods. She writes, this appears to be the only place where agricultural uses are permitted. Urban farm may be permitted in PF and other zoning areas outside of rural neighborhoods as well. And then she also says transit is also necessary to rural neighborhoods. Transit could include access to park and ride areas, which allow commuting into the city via mountain line, for instance. So those two things.
The first one about food-based and agriculture-based businesses, we debated putting like a bullet in all the sections, but what we ended up doing was we have policy D10, which is expand opportunities for agriculture and food system support to all land use types. So I think the issue is we just didn't know, we hadn't done enough research on this to be like, what things do we want where clearly enough to have like a good answer section by section. So we put this policy for the whole section. So even though we know rural has a predominant agricultural setting, it's definitely still covered. It's just kind of covered further down the list.
We also need to define these things, like we're working with this with sustainability on McAllister Ranch, where they're doing that kind of the urban. It's not really a community garden. It's not really agriculture, food production. It's something in between, and our code doesn't have a use. And so, and the other thing, it's not just allowing these land uses, it's identifying, it's actually defining what these are, so that the planning staff can go back and say, here's the definition, so that we really can have a better idea of what of these types of uses should go in certain zoning districts. It's probably safe to say that we can have food production in every zoning district, because a community garden, I think, already is allowed. Straight up food manufacturing maybe isn't appropriate in residential, but in commercial and industrial. We also need to define what is it that we're trying to do, so that we can better set our code up for success. So we just add a little. We are currently working on that. Okay.
We had an
But
interesting.
it's always good to get that too.
Yeah, we had an interesting inquiry a few years ago. Where someone asked if they could turn a not used car wash and close it in and grow mushrooms in it under grow lights. Like fancy, like restaurant mushrooms.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, not the psychedelic ones, but like, like oysters and, gnocchis and things that nice restaurants in Flagstaff would like better year-round access to. We don't allow you to put that in indoor agriculture in a commercial zone. And so those are the kinds of things that we definitely need to do more homework. We know we've had some inquiries, but that's also an evolving area of technology in some ways too, with the way hydroponics are done internally. And some of that's being changed by the fast uptick of marijuana production as a very much high-tech agricultural use. That's starting to trickle out to other agricultural uses. So it really needs a full look and not just something we pop in here that might be outdated very quickly.
And then what do you think about the transit?
Yeah, I actually think that's a good catch. I think there's some language about, here, I'll get them in. Some language about rural transit that we should have put in the rural neighborhood, not there currently.
Says,
Connectivity to the Flagstaff urban trail system and public transit, community opportunities may exist.
Yeah, they exist, but maybe we can flesh that out a little bit.
Hi, and this is Estella with Mountain Line. Yeah, I support adding that language about park and ride. There's also a term in our 5-year plan, Flagstaff in Motion, called kiss and ride, which essentially is more just like a drop-off point, so you don't have the infrastructure of like a parking lot. So that's also something to consider.
All right. Are we gonna move on to the goals and policies? I think before we do that, we'll take a little break.
Do we want to look at the map for the goals and policies, or do we want to look at goals and policies?
Yeah, let's look at the map first.
Okay, pull up the map while you're on break. What time do you leave it at?
I must.
10 past, so 7:10.
I would like to try to get, I'll just go to North Rim for a night, you know.
Right.
No, there's again.
Go there. So much history.
Are you ready?
I'd like to, I know we're moving into the map, but I've just been kind of mulling on something. And as a non-planner, I still have a problem with the building block cartoon. I just find this really confusing. I'm constantly going back and between these various concepts. And I don't know if there's a way to do it differently. I wish I could offer a constructive alternative, but I just continue to struggle with it.
What is it that's like, is it the like idea of having like a form with no detail to it that's the struggle, or?
Well, this doesn't really look like a town. Or, you know what, I mean, it's a funny kind of diagram that's linear and, I don't know, I don't know if others feel this way, but I think when, I think about people voting, and I think about people.
Hold on, we're trying to get at what you're talking about. Keep scrolling, the blue cartoon, that's what she's talking about.
No, no, the building block.
Yeah, you were right.
Oh, the building block images. This one?
Yeah, I just find it difficult.
Yeah, and I mean, this is really, so what the statute kind of asks us to look at, right, is development pattern, the language it uses, and then density, intensity, uses that part of it. And there's two lenses to look at pattern, right? You can look at it from the site, we call it the site plan view, where you're looking like down, like you're in the air over the plan area. And then there's the pedestrian oriented view. And sometimes you see people put together like visualizations where it's from the point of view of a pedestrian. We kind of did neither of those things with much detail here. This is just supposed to kind of replace an image. Let me see if I can pull it up from the current plan. That's maybe a little more, let me see if the one from the current plan is less or more confusing.
Why do we need-
Yeah, it's a good question. Do we
That's
need?
a really good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think it
Yeah.
doesn't, yeah.
It doesn't help, it doesn't.
Yeah,
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, because you kind of stew on it.
I mean, I know the image you're talking about in the other one too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just, fast forwarding to when this is going to be on the ballot, as I've talked to people in the community and they're asking me kind of what's going on, and I always hear the same two things. I always hear that, well, I hope, we can keep the character of our communities throughout this. But I feel like I have to be really realistic with people and say, we have to build up because we are landlocked and there isn't enough land. So there has to be trade-offs, and that always quiets the conversation. Because in a way, it's like it's an overpromise to say adding 20,000 more people by 2045, the character of town isn't going to change. There are places where it can be like, people love our downtown. I love our downtown district. Look around the state and who has a nice actual downtown? We do, but that can kind of stay the same, but everything else is just going to change. And when I tell people how many people are being projected, they get it, but there's just this silence about it. And I think when this goes in front of the public, I don't know who the detractors will be, but a communication plan to try and provide that honest picture of the balance and trade-offs is just gonna have to be really clear, but simple, a lot simpler than like a diagram like this.
This is the diagram we were trying to replace.
Oh, yeah, that's really.
This one's really difficult. I never liked this.
I'm with David.
Yeah, just.
Just get rid of both of them. Okay. I might keep it for a slide. Is that okay? Like if I kept it for like a presentation slide where I can like talk people through it? Cause it's,
I don't think it adds anything.
I don't either. I think it's just.
Nice, you have nice photographs and the nice
Yeah.
drawings. I think,
The
I
example.
like having both of those.
Example of suburban instead of just
This
generic.
has nothing.
It's trying to describe, like, the purpose of the narrative is it's describing the land types.
Right.
It's describing urban, it's describing suburban. And I say this cautiously, like, would we want to have just like an example of what is an urban? Because I heard that a lot of one of the public meetings is people were like, well, I don't even know what suburban, I don't know what you mean by suburban. But that also has its own set of challenges because if it's suburban can look like a lot of things. So when you take one example, now people think that they're talking about, and then it looks like something different. But that's not what the picture showed. And you hear that probably every day, like several times a day, like that's not what the picture said. So, yeah, maybe it's better just to have no.
Kind of like what Diane's been talking about, our neighborhood meetings that we had. And we were very vocal and very education oriented with folks that came in to understand the different scenarios that we were proposing. So it is a lot of education, and I really try to tell people, anybody I talk to, especially at the markets, we're starting to get flooded right now, is go to the website, go look at that. It will explain to you why we got to go up. This isn't our decision. This is a decision that is not only economic to its entirety, but we can't afford to go out. It's infrastructure. It's, you know, and the more that you kind of talk to people, they get it.
They do.
But unless you go to a neighborhood meeting and unless you go on the website, I think to your point, they're just going, huh? What's gonna happen to our town? But it's just a matter of them getting educated. And I always just try to be very vocal as well. Because yes, we are gonna go up. It's about the only way we can go. You know, at least you're still maintaining a lot of other things and they seem to understand it. But I always refer people to the website. Go look at it. Go educate yourself and spread the word while you're at it.
But also spend a lot of time on the website, so.
Yeah.
So let me not promise to remove this, though I totally hear that suggestion. Let me take this feedback to the graphic designer, Adam, and let him mull it over. I've sort of done that. Everybody's kind of familiar with the planning pyramid that we have in the current plan, where it's got like the 3 levels of planning, and we put it on slides for years. He's actually trying to reimagine that graphic in a couple different ways that could be more informative. And this is that level of graphic. So let me ask him what he thinks on it. Just as
Regular people need to be able to.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I mean, he might be able to take like some of our precedent images and like do call out boxes or something that's just like way past the skill level associated with this current graphic.
Help if those kind of like blobs and it's like color coded and everything, if that was projected onto a simplified map of Flagstaff, because everybody knows where our downtown is, everybody knows where our suburban areas are, and if they were planted over
Aerial.
that's the corridor. Route 66 is the corridor that you're talking about with that weird bar shape, like.
Yeah, just an example driven.
Yeah.
Yeah, take like a little tranche, like a little.
Green
block.
cross. Yeah.
We'll just get rid of the damn thing.
And why I guess I'm still unclear. Why are you using the term suburban? I mean, for any of us that have lived in large metropolitan areas, you know, we don't have a Manassas, Virginia. You know, we have like Baderville. I don't understand why we use the term suburban when it is such an urban anchored concept with first tier suburbs and second tier suburbs, and it just has confused me.
Go ahead. Yeah, so somebody was chiming in and saying, can we use the GIS maps? And yeah, we can use the aerials to maybe think about this graphic in a more contextualized way. But getting to your topic, I mean, one of the things with the last regional plan, because I started right after it was put in place, is much more of the city was designated suburban, like almost all of it. But when you go to the 1970 Vision 1990 plan, we only had urban. So and same
an intermediate
Yeah, well, but do we need an intermediate term, I guess? I mean, there's also some feedback from some property owners who have greenfield sites with a concern that if urban and rural are the only choices, or if we don't have that intermediate or that graduated scale, that they will be pushed to do less density rather than more, because getting to the point where you have enough infrastructure and the cost of creating the infrastructure that supports an urban environment is very high. Like the areas we've identified as urban are areas where we can retrofit or invest to get us to a more urban place. And the greenfield sites maybe are a few generations away from doing that, given what it costs to put in water and sewer and new roads. So, you've heard kind of this back and forth of like, maybe 6 dwelling units as a minimum is too high, or maybe it's 2. Like, so, I mean, that's a piece we didn't talk about, is those future desired densities. Those are kind of grounded in the scenario planning, but they're also flexible. And if we want to talk about those a little bit, we could. Our current code really allows up to 29 dwelling units per acre. And then after that, you need permits and additional approvals. If we want to get to these denser urban places, we're going to have to find ways to allow those things in a way the community finds acceptable and is by right, so that people can actually do them without going through lengthy processes with a lot of uncertainty. Well, so do we want to invest that way everywhere? I kind of think of suburban as, we have much less suburban in this map than the previous map.
Does suburban work for everybody? I guess if it doesn't, I'm the only person.
You just feel like it has baggage.
I think of it as, it's like Flagstaff, right? We've got this Flagstaff boundary. Flagstaff's a city. I grew up in Minneapolis, and then there were suburbs outside of Minneapolis. And so I just get confused. Flagstaff is a city, it's a city, but we're designating some places within a city. And this is a different term than urban. So
Yeah.
perhaps I'm thinking of the political delineations, and you're thinking of it in terms of geographic delineations, and maybe that's my hang up.
I also think we're thinking of it as a type of development. It's a suburban type of development.
Right.
Like when you look at most of the neighborhoods, they're not urban neighborhoods. They don't have little corner stores. They're not walkable.
Right.
They're not urban. We have an urban core. We are technically, from a census data standpoint, we are an urban community, but it's a development pattern. So I think maybe it's clarifying that it's a suburban development pattern versus.
I like that. That actually tells me a lot.
Yeah, because like I wouldn't consider my neighborhood very urban. I can easily access an urban area from my neighborhood, but the pattern there's cul-de-sacs, there's not any commercial internal to my neighborhood. I have an HOA that tells us when to put our trash cans away. I mean, that is suburban. That is a post-World War II dichotomy that didn't exist prior to Levittown existing, right? So that's the kind of thing that planners think of as suburban, is that pattern.
And rural is rural, when I think of rural, is you're in well and septic. You don't want that in the city. We're encouraging new developments required to have city water. So I think maybe it is just saying it's a type of development versus, because I get what you're saying. It's not a bedroom community.
Right, exactly.
It's Flagstaff. So I think what you said makes sense.
We'll move on to the map. Does anyone have any comments on the map?
You got Michelle's comments about changing the coloring for the outline of the urban.
Yes.
More obvious that that's what it is.
I did see too, I just want to be clear. I know we put the urban growth boundary on here, just so you know, there's no changes to the urban growth boundary on this map. And I don't know if there will or won't be. I'm still sending, the urban growth boundary policy has been very complicated to discuss internally. I have submitted it to legal for some legal review that needs to happen before we put anything out. So It is not going to be available today. I am so hopeful I will have it by the August 27th meeting, so we might have to have some set aside time to talk about it then. But yeah, changing the color on the map is easy, but if people had other urban growth boundary comments, we don't have anything prepped yet because
It's illegal.
yeah, it's illegal. We are taking a hard look at it. That's what I can say. Like I have to say Water Services really is looking at it and thinking, we've had an urban growth boundary since 1990. Do we have the right one? Is this the right way to do it? Does it fit our needs? And so conversations just started way back in February and we've just not gotten it completed yet. Oh yes, Anthony has got his hand up in the chat.
Yeah, hey, just a quick question. While I'm looking at the map, I'm thinking about John Wesley Powell Boulevard, and is it because it's not developed yet that we don't have these different colorations in that area?
You mean that it's mostly suburban neighborhood medium density?
Yeah, basically.
I did show the map that we talked about with the preferred scenario to the large property owners in the John Wesley Powell area. They are still giving feedback on this and we're refining what we've talked about with them quite a bit.
But that's the likely development path.
Yeah, but this is really the likely development pattern is that there is so much steep topography and floodplain out in this area that once you take into account cluster development and the areas that they won't be developing or that they will be developing very sparsely, it doesn't add up to as much density as I think they tried to predict you could put out here in the last plan.
Yeah, back when it was kind of.
Yeah, where it had all the activity centers and it still has some areas that could potentially be activity centers. I went and took this pattern and these numbers back to Cascadia Partners and I did ask them, is there so little out here that we're getting away from the preferred scenario? And they actually said they didn't over predict out here. So this pattern you see still fits within the breadth of the preferred scenario. It's not like below it or we're not pushing it down. We're just kind of acknowledging the topography and some of the limitations and which I think we didn't even understand as well as we do now when we were doing this in 2010 to 2012. Right? Because the property owners are engaged, they've done their kind of initial due diligence on future development on their properties, and that really changes the conversation. But I think we will continue to refine this area based on property owner feedback. So I don't even know that it's final yet, but a conversation we can keep having.
Excellent information. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks for the question.
So the one I'm looking at, which is not the one that shows Camp Navajo, says this is a future road demonstration city, but it actually does include a lot of county land on it. That's a little confusing.
Yeah, I think it's just zoomed into the city limits. Like the one that says city, like the extent of the map is the edges of the city boundary, but it includes county because we don't really cut that out.
Yeah, I guess, would you want to just cut it off and have that all be blank outside of this? Would.
Yeah, I think the language in the current plan says like city scale, and I think maybe just scale is missing from the draft.
Okay.
That. It's like city scale and region scale. Okay, we can just add that.
I mean, in reality, when any of us use it, we all just go on to the GIS and zoom in anyway.
We'll still have the GIS that everybody can zoom in.
Anything else? I had one comment. Elsa, can you pull up on the intersection of Butler and Lone Tree? And the urban center that's there? So full disclosure. this property right here.
Sure.
Right, I'm putting in the right one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And we've been going through a rezoning case currently, so, we're under the existing regional plan. This new regional plan won't apply to us by the time it, well, our rezoning will have happened by the time this is applicable. So it doesn't feel like there's a conflict there to me, but the reason I bring up is kind of, I spend a lot of time out there because I own it. And so I, you know, I'm often the only person we ever see walking on Butler in that location, right? And it's a busy road, with a lot of traffic. Traffic is going relatively fast, and I think it's only gonna get busier because of the overpass going through there. You know, I think we're looking at somewhere between 60 and 70,000 vehicles a day at that intersection, which puts it up there as, you know, the second or third busiest intersection in town. So I'm just wondering whether that corridor of Butler, I think it's the corridor of Butler, not the right running east-west, not Lone Tree running north and south, because what's now Colorado will become Lone Tree, and it doesn't really have access from either side because it turns into a bridge straight away. But it feels to me like that Butler corridor is an urban corridor to an urban center because of the way that I stand in front of those buildings, right? That, you know, even my building, my neighbor's building, I'm going over to recently. And the idea of having, you know, 5 stories with commercial on the bottom with like that many cars speeding past just doesn't feel like the right development pattern. And it feels like the urban corridor pattern might be more suitable.
Yeah, the places where we have that kind of pattern currently are kind of the uncommon. If you think of that, they're, what is it called? Yugo Flagstaff now, the one that's on Milton, facing the Speedy Car Wash next to Chick-fil-A. And then there's the Standard, which has a commercial frontage on kind of a very high volume road. And then, of course, the Jack does too, though they have never filled their commercial. It is more like people access those by turning into a parking lot, and then they walk around the front of the building to get to the business.
Those places that you just mentioned, urban corridor or urban center?
Let's see what we define those as here. Standard is in an urban center. And the Yugo Flagstaff is in a suburban center. So we do have those designated as centers right now. But it is a good point. Is that like do we need to go out and take some pictures of the front of the Standard? So people kind of get that sense, like the Standard kind of dealt with it by setting that frontage back just a little and like thinking about having a little more pedestrian space. In the front, they have some railings. I don't know if anybody's ever parked and tried to walk to the burger place, or if you're a gentleman with a beard, they'll give you a beard spa experience right there as well. Haven't tried that, the shave. But you do like pull into their parking garage and then you walk out this busy street to access the commercial space. So it is like a very specific thing. We do have an example in both an urban and suburban corridor, or urban and suburban center.
I think in that case, more information is better. If you're coming from anyone like an owner or.
You know, I mean, what I'm suggesting is that we change that designation from, I'm not asking for more.
And also define it.
I'm asking that that area is changed from urban center to urban corridor, running along the Butler corridor in that location, right? So I mean, you have it a little bit there already, right? So that portion of the south side, that's urban corridor, right? A couple of those lots right there. So continuing that designation further down Butler.
on that, remembering that a corridor is kind of more commercial and less like housing in the back maybe, or less housing focus, less mixed use focus. Particularly.
We're basing it on traffic count, of course, but what's surrounded, I think will tell the story the better. Right? So what are the uses on those two pieces right now?
Just the feeling for me is, right, like if I was, like I said, it doesn't really apply because we're not really going basically to the end of our process. But the feeling is that those more commercial uses are more appropriate to streets with much higher traffic than residential uses. I mean, standing there, it's impossible to imagine would I want to have an apartment right above that, right? Might I want to have the apartment that's in Aspen Place where it's set back from the street there and the commercial is what's kind of separates it from Butler? Like that makes more sense to me. No, I think it's, I mean, maybe if it's student housing because they don't care as much about the noise and things like that.
East Coast,
What's that?
East Coast doesn't care. They love noise. Me, no, but my friends, they just love noise.
Should we be analyzing it as if the overpass is already constructed and it's there? Not based on what we're looking at right now, but based on what it's gonna be like when the overpass is there.
I think that David's pointing out is that traffic count.
Does that make a
Well,
difference?
How do you change it now? Or what do you do to change it from centered?
Under the corridor.
Yeah, right now.
Just change the color.
Oh,
I'll put those in and does the go edit.
Is it done? It's like, change the color.
But so
where else do we have corridors currently?
go back, yeah, back out. Corridors are a kind of between centers, right? So like Schweitzer Canyon and like urban corridors are like Schweitzer Canyon and Route 66 out to 4th Street. We have West Street as an urban corridor because it's designated a corridor in the current plan. Kind of the CCC school corner up on the north end of Lockett and 4th. And then we had a little conversation the other day on whether, and I think maybe it was Michelle's comments of whether Flag High School and, oh, sorry, Elsa, go west, please. Yeah. Yeah, right now Flag High School and Marshall are in an urban corridor. Nope, you went too far. Yeah. And we grabbed a couple houses with that accidentally, and people were asking if we should get rid of the houses, but I don't know if these bigger educational institutions fit a corridor as well. We don't really talk about where they'll be because we sort of said in the plan, like public facilities everywhere. Like we just need to put public facilities in context, not try and keep them out of certain parts of town because we want public services and facilities to be located in their best location for the whole community. But yeah, so some of these north of downtown areas do have corridor setting. Humphreys, Beaver, San Francisco, north of downtown. So is Butler more like Schweitzer or more like Milton? Or more, I guess, more like the north end of Milton. Yeah, that's a way to put it.
I guess it's more like,
Definitely. I think it's more like.
yeah. But these designations, so like. If David wants to do something to his parcel, how much is the hole on the map going to affect his ability to do what he wants to do? This is sort of our,
If he has the zoning, doesn't affect it at all.
And if
What he
he wants
wants
to rezone.
But if he
that's
wants to rezone, this is the first place we go.
Yeah.
Like when people come in and say, I'd like to rezone my parcel so I can do something that's not allowed in my current zoning. The first thing we do is go look at this map. And then we go look at those
Bigger
framework
step.
guidelines.
Much bigger step.
Yeah. And it's a bigger step, but this is part of the screening criteria, basically, of like, can staff, like people want to know when they request a rezoning is, can staff support this? Can staff get to a point, if we're working through these negotiations, they can stand up in front of council with a recommendation of approval? And there's some things people come in and we say, it would be very difficult, given what's in the regional plan, for us to recommend approval on this. You probably also need a plan amendment. Or it can be like, no, this pretty much fits and we can start working on it with you. So it's like a starting point to that conversation. It's not the end, but it's important that we feel like the matches are good.
And excuse me for asking this then, is when this is up for review, can anybody in the city say, hey, I want to change the color on my?
Yes, anybody can.
So this is just another, it's added to our timeline.
Right, and so I do think that's important, like just constitutional due process. If someone comes in and says, I want to change my property from an urban center to an urban corridor, staff has to process their application. We have to bring it to council.
But I think if I understood you,
Yeah.
Paul, you're talking about through this process, through the regional planning process. So through this process, yes, once this goes out for public review, anyone, I can say, hey, I think Paul's property would be great for,
Right.
you know, a high density mixed use. So, but that is part of this process. Hopefully people stay focused on their own property.
Right.
And it's likely going to be the more undeveloped properties or things in areas where we see potential for redevelopment, which
Not pay attention to what I'm saying.
that's really why this plan is also going more to identifying what the land use designations, identifying the zoning designations that go with it. Because that helps staff, so it helps everybody. It helps you as a property owner or someone who's buying a piece of property. No, okay, I'm thinking about this. So I'm buying that property for whatever it is you're thinking about doing. Then you know, okay, I have the zoning or I don't, but hey, the regional plan would support a rezone to that zoning district that would allow it. So then you know, okay, that's a safe bet. If it also helps that your neighbors know kind of what's the likelihood of that property, like if it were to be rezoned, what are kind of the zoning districts they make? Okay, and then it helps staff. We have something to point to and say, these would be the zoning districts that would be supported by that designation.
Let me bring up a few other differences since we're having this conversation about Butler, and then we can see if we want to have it about anywhere else. So in the table of zoning compatibility, urban centers desired density is more than 50 dwelling units per acre. Urban corridors, by comparison, the floor is only 20 dwelling units. Which is like the difference between like a garden apartment and like the Alara apartments next to Whole. Alara is about 40 something dwelling units per acre. And garden apartments in Woodlands Village are more like 22 or 20 dwelling units per acre, just to help you kind of imagine it a little bit. In the urban center, because we're focused on mixed use, the zones allowed are central business, community commercial, commercial services, highway commercial. Those are all the commercial zones that allow 60-foot mixed use buildings. The neighborhood community commercial, which is kind of a shorter one that allows 45-foot mixed use buildings. High density residential, and then two transect zones, the T6, which is our tallest, and T5, and then public facilities. Urban corridors, I'll have almost the same categories with that lower ideal zoning density, except it's T5, which is that the hub is T5 and T4 on one side. So if you think of the hub, the shorter side of it is T4 and the taller side of it is a T5 building. So those are the scales just to think of. So there's not a lot of, there's a difference in the descriptions, and in the terms of like where we're targeting density, but the difference in what zones are allowed, there's really only one. that is different. It's T6s would be allowed in an urban center and T4 in an urban corridor. So, you know, we talked about, are they different or the same? Is it like Milton or not? But that's just another way to look at it too. You know, there's not a ton of variation in what zoning districts you would consider there,
Except for the density.
except for the desired density.
That's really.
But I think we wouldn't keep someone from having a higher density. It's more like a floor. It just says more than 20 dwelling units per acre, or more than 50. So you could still propose 50 in an urban corridor.
Yeah, I think my thought is not in regards to density, it's more in regards to right, that when we talk about the urban centers, we're really pushing right a non-auto oriented world. And we have a major road, right? Like one of our, I mean, if we take, we've got Milton, Butler, that portion of Butler at least, and Route 66 as, you know, our three major roads. They're kind of already, they're auto oriented by virtue of being big streets. You know, so I'm just, it just feels to me like we're forcing a bit of a development pattern on, you know, onto those areas that doesn't make much sense practically. I think it makes a ton of sense set back a little bit from that, you know, with a sort of buffer to a certain extent from that street. Busy road. No, does anyone else care?
Are we saying that the urban centers would have less focus on pedestrian only, like setback or sidewalks? They could have higher rise buildings. The urban center had at least 50 dwelling units per acre. There's less focus on condo access. Does that mean there's a narrower strip of sidewalk or parkway required or landscape strip?
This, I would just say that I hope the plan doesn't get that level of detail, because it's not.
Oh, okay.
Those are design standards.
I'm just.
I appreciate, like, I would suggest we do not put that in.
Yeah, we talked about that a little in the high occupancy housing plan, that like what we have this build, our current zoning code in the city at least has this build forward emphasis, but on these higher volume roads, not, you know, not only the uncommon things, but even like the Dunkin' Donuts next to Chick-fil-A, you know, gets pushed forward, but actually some of the design considerations, or maybe it should be about 20 feet back, like, and have landscaping and other things that buffer it a little more from the busy road, because, you know, you sit outside Dunkin' Donuts in their little shady chair and you try and have a conversation, there's a ton of noise, and it's not, you know, most of their seating they put on the side with the parking lot. So, you know, those are like the next level down design considerations. You know, what it says in the centers and the corridors is, it's not like an urban center urban corridor has unlimited automotive uses. It just allows a little more, like it allows more drive-throughs and things. Like what we've seen that really functions for drive-through kind of things in the urban areas are things like, you know, the Matador kiosk or the little Bank of America one, like a quick little drive-through where people are just picking something up and going. Or the AZ Wicked, right? Those are kind of a kiosk style one, but like big, like bank drive-throughs, or, you know, Habit Burger or In-N-Out, those are more we see on the corridors. And so, yeah, it may be that we want to look at some of the corridors and language and make them so that that's a little clearer.
The goal for what corridors are supposed to be.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're gonna be starting the master streets plan. It really will get more into what that looks like. I mean, I think it's important to identify it in the regional plan. That's the only thing about the timing of those two things. It'd be nice to have that transportation plan Would help. I don't know if there's a way to write into the plan that this could be modified. I don't know.
I think if
I
the
don't want to confuse this.
I think if when the master streets plan comes through, they think there's things that need to change in the regional plan, we could process an amendment and come back. Sometimes you go down to that level of detail and then you go, oh, actually, the broader stuff needs a revision. Because when we got down to the details, we found it, we needed something else. This document kind of uses the high occupancy housing findings that way. Like we looked through that plan and even though maybe that's not the perfect way to go forward, it did do a lot of more refined analysis around these topics to kind of set a stage for these conversations.
So I feel like I'm hearing that open corridors does not refer to our corridors. It refers to options.
That's the way it's, and I think that's the way it's described, isn't it? Maybe it's not, maybe I just said it in my head, but I'll check. Yeah, it says urban corridors, areas with access to collectors or arterial streets in the urban context, street parking and active transportation are encouraged. And pedestrian safety is a priority. Yeah, we don't really say that they're the places between centers, but that kind of is how we've mapped them.
Except for the descriptions of the primary differences that one is a little bit.
Budget.
I mean, I don't know, my point stands that I think that the areas along the major roads should be the ones that it is being slightly more auto oriented. And the stuff that's supposed to be more, pedestrian friendly, designed for folks to be encouraged to walk and bike should be set back a little bit from those busy roads. I think that, to my mind, right, this example you gave in terms of those student housing projects are examples in which like our current plan and our current zoning code have failed really to achieve the outcomes that we want, right? We kind of force fit a mixed use desire for mixed use property into those major roads. And what we've ended up being built, because it's what economically makes sense, are, very large student housing complexes with, minimally used mixed use on the bottom, which is not attractive from a tenant standpoint because doesn't have very good parking and is on a really major road that no one actually wants to walk down or, to your point, have a cup of coffee in front of. And so those areas are generally basically leased, at cost or at a loss because they can make so much money off of the student housing that sits above them. And that's why the only ones we've seen are big student housing complexes. And I wouldn't, that to me feels like a failure, and I'd like to see us move in a direction that sets us up for success.
The solution to modify descriptions or modify the map. That's my thinking. That's where I don't know that I have clear direction. Because I could see solving the crux of the issue you're describing in both ways.
I mean, the problem I have with, I suppose I could go either way because
How I currently feel too.
you have those urban corridors, places like Schweitzer, right? That not like Milton. And so they have a role there. But then you have, so I mean, maybe it's a flexibility within the urban center when it's on a major arterial.
And then forcing them to push the development back gives them less units per acre and they would probably have to kibosh the commercial because they're just using it to make their numbers. So if they have to go back a little ways, they're gonna lose that. Maybe that helps as well. Because in Phoenix, that's what they're doing in Rio Salado. All that commercial's vacant still.
Yeah, it just sits vacant, yeah.
It's because they allowed them to go to the actual footprint. And they had to use that to build their other units up, but it was part of their mandate. So it has to now go back to probably the guidelines now, a little bit too. But hey, if you're gonna put this here on a busy roadway, you're gonna need to push it back and see if that, I don't know how you get, that would almost go to city requirement a little bit too.
Anyone online want to weigh in on that? Just because there's a couple people sitting, listening online. You haven't heard from?
I'm listening. It is a dilemma. It's like a buy-in, you know, you use your commercial to get the unit. That's what's been happening to get the units above. I was just thinking about the setbacks for an arterial and relying on zoning code to define that. No, just thinking about it.
Until we start seeing, and you made a great example earlier, Sarah, of the barber shop and things of that nature. First of all, it's a learning curve. You got to figure out where to park, and it feels uncomfortable, just like anything that's new your first time. But until we start seeing more of that retail actually being used, it's going to be a big learning curve and a growing pain for all of us to have to deal with. It's tough to be at the forefront of this conversation where we're actually making these changes that need to happen, and at the same time not wanting to lose what we already have. So it's just a comment on my behalf, understanding that the struggle that is going to have to be faced by folks that don't want to see change and don't want to learn, just like I didn't want to when I had to go to that barber shop, and now I love it. Now I really enjoy interacting with so many different people that are just always there because of the volume of people in that small area, and the fun that you have interacting with them. That's it. Thanks.
Okay, so let's move on, but
That's clear as mud to me, but we'll try and take the conversation into account. The conversation's really good, but I don't feel like I have clear direction.
yeah, so I was gonna. What I would propose, if everyone can live with it, is that within the framework guidelines for the urban center, that we adjust them to account for more flexibility along those major arterials. In terms of I think specifically in terms of the preference for vertical uses, the discouragement of auto uses. So that's about it.
That's something you're going to love with?
That's the last word.
Another one.
Kind of uses.
Automotive uses like drive-throughs and.
Fabricating more flexibility.
Yeah, I'm saying providing more flexibility, right, specifically to those two things, so you could have. So you're not driven, yeah.
Or high volume art, major arterials.
High volume.
Sounds good.
I hate drive-throughs, but.
Well, and I can see like, so I'll take that back to the planning team and see what. Imagine there. So Julie asked, does flexibility mean additional uses? I think the word you used earlier was separation. That was how I was understanding it. By flexibility, you meant flexibility to have some separation between the high volume arterial and the housing or denser uses.
Yeah, so you can have a development pattern that's similar to Aspen Place, right, where you're putting smaller commercial buildings right on the busy road and setting your apartments back a little bit so that they're on a busy street. Everyone good with that? All right, should we move on to goals and policies then?
Yep.
What, Susie, you want to just do the same thing and you just kind of lead us through it, and then if anyone else has any comments?
I will be glad. Okay, let me get back to the goal.
Also getting them pulled up too.
Now, I'm not gonna go through all of them, because you said you could just, do all of them, you could just do it. But okay,
Unless somebody who read Michelle's comment wants to like object for a different thing, they all seem. I think.
okay, so the first one I wanna cover is DP6.
So sorry, Susie, does anyone have anything before we get to DP6?
2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
I just had I guess, an observation. I had a conversation with Chief Millard of the fire department, last week, and talking about how the, higher density, higher level buildings require so much more, fire, equipment and manpower and so forth to deal with. And this is what we're talking about, higher density, higher level. I feel we should include their need, and this not just for the fire, but fire, police, ambulance, all emergency services we need to anticipate and prepare for increasing the requirements there, more than just the requirements would be for increasing population. If we had the same density, he was saying one example is if he has an emergency on the third or fourth floor building, he has to send out two units and not just one, because he needs the extra manpower just to get equipment up and down and that sort of thing. So, and obviously firefighting at higher levels requires a lot more equipment, sophisticated equipment. We haven't included that in here anywhere. I don't know how or where to put it in. Maybe this is the section where we should say something like increase fire, police and ambulance services to adequately serve higher density neighborhoods, something like that. I think to go somewhere to.
I mean, I don't disagree with you. I don't think that this is the right chapter for it. I think if there's, I think that maybe potentially there is a space in the public safety chapter, right, to talk about how this impacts.
I think I talked about
I
it.
thought we covered it under IPS.
Someplace else.
I thought we covered it under IPS 3, the infrastructure and public safety one, where we talk about providing high quality emergency response.
We didn't.
Yeah, we said firefighting resources should continually assess location and capacity to adapt to wildfire and multi-story building responses.
Oh, okay.
So that's already actually covered explicitly
Okay.
in the IPS chapter, but thank you for cross-reference.
Did you say
I
you
like
had one
that.
for DP6?
That was the only one I had. You asked me.
No, I thought I saw you raise your hand.
Yeah, but I'm retracting,
Okay,
'cause it's gonna come up, so.
okay. Susie, go ahead then, DP6.
There was someone who tried to speak up online.
Sorry.
I'm not sure. Who it
No,
was.
no, we're good. We're good.
Okay, on DP6, Michelle writes, what is the density needed to support transit? Because you mentioned that in here.
That, the current number in Estella, I think you're on line 2. Are you still there?
We referenced that in the transportation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think it was 50, I think it was 7 to 22 or something like that. But I think we did a different. This is where I have a whole document and we'll get a lot of cross references in here.
Okay.
But I think we have it covered in another chapter. My memory, Stella, is not on
It's-
anymore.
For transit supported density, we need between 8 and 15 units per acre.
Thank you.
I don't know if she said that here, but when we were talking,
There you go. I thought it was like
where did that information come from?
from Mountain Line. It's from nationwide studies of what it takes to have rooftops or household homes that can support a transit line. There's a lot of good academic research on this too. UCLA has produced a bunch of it, so Western specific as well.
So my next one is DP9.
I have DP8.
Okay.
DPA, go for it.
Yeah, it's a small, I just wanted. So I have a accessible natural area right next to neighborhood I live in, but it's outside of it. It is not central. And I don't care if it's central. So I couldn't help but think, well, why do I care if it's central? Or if there's a public gathering place where social events might occur? Why do I not want the people in the next neighborhood to be there? So I just thought, what is this for?
Well, I kind of, it was the one that stuck out to me as being kind of like,
Well, yeah, I just didn't see it, so.
I mean, particularly for accessible natural areas, right? Because virtue of being natural areas, they tend to be on the boundaries.
They're between two.
I get that the gathering space is a little bit more, like in having like the town.
Yeah.
Feel, right?
So I don't know, I guess I think the plan would be just fine if this was needed. I mean, what is it at?
Well, in the current plan, we have 8 policies just about civic spaces, which is what we called them at the time. And this is an attempt to take those 8 policies and try and turn them into one that gets at the crust, the heart of what we're getting. What I would tell you is not having a policy that says something like this would reduce the negotiation ability of planners to discuss this topic in discretionary development cases. So I do think we deleting this is a risk that I'd want to make everyone aware of. We could certainly modify it.
Paul, is your concern the word central?
Yeah.
You just get rid of that, is it?
Get rid of that word.
I want public gathering spaces, I want accessible natural areas, but does it have to be in the middle of my neighborhood?
Can I just ask a question? We already require this, so why are we even, if we're gonna take out centrally, what is? the
Yeah, what
purpose
is
to start
the,
with this
yeah.
terms?
I mean, I think that the issue is the location, like our current zoning code doesn't tell you where to locate this.
Essentially, I guess on Paul's note, because I kind of agree with him, essentially may not work for every neighborhood. Some neighborhoods it might make sense, in another it might not. So is there just, if we're gonna keep it as a policy, maybe it's, I don't know what the word is, but it's.
Maybe it's something like in a pedestrian accessible location or something like that, because the place that's come up as an issue is when there's a big barrier for pedestrians in one neighborhood to actually get to the space, like because of either traffic volume or it's just difficult to walk because there is a hill. Like we wouldn't want someone to come in. Well, there's like a terrible meme about this that planners have passed around where it says like, it shows a giant boiling pit of lava. And it says, oh, you cannot locate your civic space in the giant pit of lava. Which I've never had to tell anyone in Flagstaff, but it's the image of like, can your open space be at the bottom of your stormwater pond?
We actually got a real question in downtown if it could be within the parking garage.
Yes, can I civic space be in the parking garage?
That's.
There, we see a lot of bad ideas. I mean, that's something we.
I trust you to do it, yeah.
So, but I mean, I guess.
Also, John Van Landingham's building converted a parking garage into a very lovely civic space, so we wouldn't want to say never do it, but gotta really think about it. Like, isn't the place the burger seating used to be, wasn't that the ramp up the parking garage and the old
Equipment.
Yeah, it was an old equipment room and things. So I mean, can my civic space be next to the old equipment room? That might be okay, but you gotta explain why. Like, so we can rethink this one a little bit, but I mean, it's gotta be meaningful.
Mhm.
So yeah, sacred space doesn't end up in parking garages, boiling pits of lava, bottom of stormwater drains.
So, yeah, so, but the notion of locating it, take out everything else, right? Locating it centrally doesn't solve the problem
Yeah.
you just described.
I think
Pedestrian access,
just change simply to somewhere within.
Or you could just say local gathering spaces and natural areas should be accessible
Every neighborhood.
in every neighborhood they serve.
DP9, Suzie?
Oh. Okay. Okay, DP9. Okay, she writes on that one, does this mean providing water and sewer infrastructure? That's the same question. Yeah. If so, we don't want to have to provide this in rural areas or outside of the city limits. What is the needed development pattern? The whole policy needs to be clarified.
Public facilities and infrastructure are, you know, like that, it's a good question. Should we include water and sewer in this? When I wrote this, I didn't intend that because we discuss infrastructure and public facilities in the public IPS chapter. I was thinking of it in a cross-referenced way with that. But also, you know, what we do not want to do is create opposition to infrastructure being placed in neighborhoods, because every urban or suburban or rural space needs the infrastructure to support it. So like Belmont, which is not within the city limits, has, you know, pump stations and well houses, and that's infrastructure and public facilities appropriate to the land use category out there.
I'm confused for the need for this because that's another thing that we're gonna require. And development's gonna be required to have these things regardless of opposition.
True, but sometimes I think too, like, where's a school going to go, or like, it's not always just our required public facilities, but it could be it's not a requirement for the development.
I wonder if it could be more than tailored to kind of that, because when I read this, I'm thinking it's the required infrastructure.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, that's the point, because you're gonna be required to have that.
Yeah, but the key is
You're saying, it's basically saying you're gonna allow a use in, for instance, like an R1 that otherwise wouldn't be allowed in an R1 because it's either a public facility or an infrastructure item that supports the rest of the R1 use.
Well, it says the community or the region. So like, for instance, there are neighborhoods that have regional parks in them. Good example is Thorpe, right? Or is, you know, Fort Tuthill is a regional park. Those parks are not just designed to serve the neighborhood. They're to serve everyone in the whole Flagstaff region. And do you,
Or allow like a fire station.
or like a fire station or a giant, you know, battery storage facility for our electrical equipment, or a cell phone tower. Not all of those are things that are required for the development, but they are required for our whole region to function. And we do have siting standards for those things, and we do put those in our zoning code, but I don't think it's up to the regional plan to be used to kind of restrict those. It's too high level. And I just didn't want to leave it with the impression, the concern I heard from staff was if we are silent, then people will assume it is not allowed, because so much of the language is permissive. So, that's just a piece of it, because like somebody said, we should put which categories have public facilities. That's not how you locate public facilities, right? If we need an electrical power line, it might cut through a bigger swath than one single land use category, and we wouldn't make it jog around an area. So if it's too broad, or if it needs some clarification, it's a good point to make here. But yeah, that's why it says see chapter X infrastructure and public safety for more details, as I wasn't including water and sewer in my mind, because we don't require water and sewer in rural areas.
Actually, it makes more sense to me just looking at it. Because it's just saying allowing public facilities. It doesn't mean the city's gonna provide it.
Yeah.
It could be, you know, like.
Are we actually, I think what we're really talking about, allowing them in the zoning designations. It's not about allowing them, it's making them allowed uses in the zoning districts. So I think, to me, that's maybe just to me, because I'm a planner, that's a nuance that I think is important. Because that's a different directive to the planning than it is to the community as a whole. And if that's what we're trying to achieve, then maybe it's more clear that ensuring that all zoning districts allow for public facilities and infrastructure as allowed uses or as uses. I don't know if we want to say allowed because they might require conditional use permit.
You're gonna refer to a chapter?
Reword that a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, let's reword it a little bit, but it's a good conversation so everybody knows what we mean.
Is there a
The next
chapter
one,
that
Susie.
we refer to, Sarah?
Yeah, there's the infrastructure and public safety chapter.
Just says question mark. Is that supposed to be a number?
It'll have a number.
Oh, eventually.
Yeah.
Okay.
By next week.
And another part of that sentence was the needed development pattern. Tell us, what is the needed development pattern? It just seems kind of weird. Who's gonna decide that?
Usually you have a siting study. They do studies for every kind of facility that says like, here's how we need to locate it. That's so unique to whatever the facility is, but communication towers come with a study that says, here's why we need a communication tower. Same with like electrical grid infrastructure. They would deliver to staff like a siting study and say, here's why we need it here.
But I think I'm gonna channel Michelle. I don't want to speak for her, but I think maybe when she's saying the way this is written, it sounds like there's a needed development pattern within the community. It's not about the actual infrastructure, so.
Just need to reword it.
Yeah, it's really the development pattern of the community. The development of the community, which is dictated by the land use plan map. And I think we don't even talk about the siting of the infrastructure.
Yeah. We'll reword that one then.
I'll do number 7 real quickly. I like the idea, except that you call it plant-based. You know, I'm afraid if my neighbor puts in goats, or farm, you know. very happy. So, you know, that agricultural and food systems awfully broad. But if it's plant-based, I'd say sure.
Well, it says, well, we might not get that choice. That backyard chicken bill says everybody's getting chickens.
Roosters are.
Roosters are not.
Yeah, now roosters
So
are.
I don't want a blank check for roosters.
That's all of the detail in the code.
Yeah.
Eliminate
We
the.
should probably also check the time pass.
I don't know if the county health department or.
What was the question?
Is there a livestock
code in
code
the
anywhere,
state.
someplace else? Like a lot of other communities will have like a livestock code.
We have an.
County does.
That's what I figured.
We have
so-
Yeah, I don't know about this. The county definitely is very specific. Roosters are not allowed. Roosters are not allowed.
I didn't know that. But, you know, I guess. Have you ever been within 100 yards of an oyster farm? You're gonna move out.
I mean, yeah,
So,
I lived in Florida. I've seen a few oyster farms.
Well, I appreciate you asking the questions. I'm curious. I highlighted that, like, just what does it mean? Why is it in here? It just seemed, I don't
well, I guess
understand.
that's right. What are the impediments right now?
Tons. We don't support much agricultural use or food production at all in our code anywhere.
Like, against the code, like if
Yeah, we just don't allow it except in
I
like,
grow corn on my backyard, somebody.
I mean, so it's not that, it's that urban farms and food production and like, remember we were talking about like, can I close in the car wash and growing mushrooms here? Like, those are almost very few of the things out there in modern agriculture are allowed in our zones.
Huh.
Most agricultural uses that are innovative or kind of on mark, everybody can garden.
All for that.
Yeah, everybody can garden, but that's why when we were talking about this at 6:15 or whenever 20 or 30, when this came up, we were saying we just need to kind of, it says expand opportunities. It does not define that well because we haven't been through a process to figure out what are all the things we need to be thinking about. We have like marijuana growing and community gardens and urban farms, but not a ton else, and there's a lot in between. Our landscaping code, Nicole pointed out to me, doesn't allow edible landscaping in commercial properties.
Is it prohibited or is it
It's
just
just
not?
not on the plant list. There's not, and it doesn't have an exemption for edible fruits and vegetables. So if you were a restaurant and you wanted to grow apple trees and things, that's not part of our landscaping code. So there's a lot of things that need to be looked at. It's not one thing. It would be very hard to describe in a policy. If that makes sense.
Have to put in this thing, it's just a recommendation.
Well, no, it's actually not just a recommendation, but you can get a waiver from the director if it's so it's not explicitly on there in that type, but someone could make an argument that they want to include it, and it could be included.
Oh, I didn't even think that for the landscaping requirements, that this was, you could only do things on the list.
You can only do things on that.
That's a whole different conversation. I think we should stay on point.
Diving into non-native landscaping right there.
Yeah, there's things like for the art, you get into all kinds of things if you go with the herb. We,
The basic answer is because at the time we wanted to really promote native plants that were appropriate to Flagstaff and not ornamentals and exotic plants and introducing them.
To Paul's point, I'm still just trying to understand the real world implication of this. So does this line mean that I could have my neighbor open a marijuana grow farm or an oyster farm next to my house? Or is that by zoning or by something else? It just seems very open. I don't get it.
so, and we're talking about DP10 still, correct?
Yeah.
I think that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, like, we need to even identify what are all the urban agriculture things they are to understand, like, I understand the exact concern and the way that this is written. I can see where you have that concern. I think in practice, what we're saying is we want to make sure that you can have at least a community garden in every zoning district. I think most people would agree that's benign. But then we do need to understand where we have other types of urban agriculture that we don't even have in our zoning code yet, that maybe does include and more like the husbandry and like livestock that's even more than just chickens. Like, we have to understand what's that, and then what are the appropriate zones?
To be determined.
Yes.
And it's not a
I
blanket.
would almost say explore instead of expand, explore opportunities for agriculture and food system support. To all land use types.
It feels friendlier.
Want to be friendly.
All right, what's the next, who's got the next one?
Anyone have anything on D11 or are we moving on?
We're running up on time.
We're on the, goal EL.
Okay, go for it.
So, okay, under maintain the supply of land to accommodate the needs of the existing and future employment and manufacturing. We said maintain, okay, we said, why is maintaining the supply of land for these needs a task of the city?
Because that goes into our economic vitality, and
But who owns the land?
it could be private developed, it could be privately held, it could be city owned. So what we're saying is we want to protect some land. Heavy industrial, commercial. So say someone has something, a piece of property that's zoned residential. And they are, I guess I should say, more likely industrial. We don't want them kind of rezoning that out of that zoning designation. We also don't want the uses allowed in the industrial zone or an employment zone to allow so many things that gets watered down, that people, because industrial land is typically cheaper. I'm using that as an example because it's a little bit easier for me, but and so industrial land is typically cheaper. So we often get requests to allow certain uses in that land that aren't really compatible with other industrial uses, because then someone wants to be able to put a brewery or something that's more commercial related in there. And that's why we're really protected in that, because if you put too many kind of conflicting uses in there, then someone that for instance, we need rock crushing they may now all of a sudden be adjacent to a brewery and a coffee roaster and all these other things that are no longer compatible. And so they have a harder time getting that use that we need. So it's kind of protecting it in a lot of different ways, making sure that we ensure we have enough to support the large employer coming in, but also protecting the zoning code, that it's really true to what that zoning district is, and that it's an employment center, and that we don't get pressured to add a whole bunch of other uses because you can get that land cheaper. So that's kind of what we're talking about, and that's why it is the job of the city to protect that.
Well, you know, that makes sense, but what this sounds like to me is it sounds like the city is supposed to keep this land.
We should, I would say in the other communities that I worked in, usually when you do a rezone and you're rezoning like industrial lands from
I think
industrial
there's
to.
a disconnect here though. So I think Susie, I think you're saying that the city itself should maintain and control their own supply of land for this
Yes.
purpose.
And
I
I'm
mean,
just,
it doesn't, that's not the intent, so maybe
Maybe
it's just.
it's just a matter of reword.
I would argue that I'm not sure of that, David. I think that maybe there needs to be an implementation strategy that goes with this, but like, for instance, kind of going back to that example of like other communities that might have industrial on land. I've seen where you have to do, like, show that you're not removing more than the needs of the future of that community that they need. Like, it could be that we maintain it through putting standards on rezones that ensure that we're keeping a proper amount of certain lands to effectively support our employment needs. So I think that's what it's trying to say. Not so much that we have a land bank of existing and future employment.
Because that's what it sounds like to me. You have a land, the city has a land bank.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to also control other land that's not city owned, I just disagree with it.
Well, and another good example of why this wording means a lot to planners is like, so for instance, there's this whole area around the airport that's currently in federal ownership that the city is planning to acquire someday for expansion of the airport park. And the whole purpose of that is that the city is going to gather and maintain a supply of employment lands around the airport. That totally is a land bank that we are gonna manage. We do not sell those properties anymore. At one point we did, and we lived to regret it. So we hang on to those properties and we lease them. We provide long-term leases and we maintain that supply. And there are places where it's very strategically important for us to do that. Around your airport where you have tons of FAA regulations and safety concerns, yeah, we want to manage that. Or we want to form an airport entity that can manage it or something like that, which is what some other cities do. As their airports get bigger, they build an airport authority, just like a port authority, right? We're not big enough to do that yet, but there are times in these employment categories where that is what we mean. It's just not always what we mean.
What about adding just continue to maintain? Is that less?
I think that's fine, but then that doesn't talk about privately owned.
I think it's almost protecting.
I understand what you're trying to do,
Yeah.
but
Can we wordsmith that? Because I think I understand. Because I think there is somewhat what Sarah's saying about the maintaining, but I think for the most part, this is really about like I think we understand what you're saying. It's not that we have a land bank and that we're trying to land bank this thing. I think that's a portion of it, but it's kind of.
Yeah, but it's. Okay.
Has anyone else got anything on EL?
I've got one. Just on the topic, you were talking about the airport area for business and so forth. Almost all the young people I talk to who are looking for new jobs say Gore is the best employer. I wish I could get a job with Gore. People who work for Gore love Gore. People who've retired from Gore love Gore because it's a high-tech, high-quality company. I think we should have something in there that specifically says something like expand opportunities for research and technical parks in our employment districts. And specifically call it out and have it in there because that's the best kind of industry that we can bring to Flagstaff is more companies like Gore.
I'm just looking at the
Cool.
I'm looking at the economic development chapter. Really quick, just to see what's there, so we can think about if it's covered or if it needs more coverage. So much cross-referencing, guys. Remember what I said, say it once and mean it? I just want to make sure we're not saying it twice. Let me look really quick. Yeah, we don't talk about research and technical areas very much in the employment, my RED ones. Though we do talk about like health and medical and manufacturing. So that is maybe a good add. I do think that's a gap. I was just confirming it.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? You go for it.
Probably research and development. On EL1, which says encourage the continued intensification, expansion and protection from encroachment of existing industrial warehousing and distribution uses in employment districts. Michelle writes, why would the plan encourage intensification if industrial and warehousing districts are located in neighborhoods? This may be an inappropriate use depending on the location of the employment district.
Well, this only counts as things that are blue on that map.
So they're not in neighborhoods.
They're not in neighborhoods.
Districts.
Okay.
But I think she's thinking of where we say in some of the urban neighborhood stuff that we may have industrial uses. There is a difference to planners between having an industrial use that is appropriate to the context and having an industrial area. So we want industrial areas to intensify, expand, and be protected from encroachment.
Okay. Growth management. That's, you can just take that. Let's see, under.
Any other employment district ones?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Growth management?
Go ahead. Go ahead to growth management.
Under GM3.
Mhm.
Let's see here. It states, maintain a supply of land to accommodate the needs of existing and future employment and manufacturing. She writes, why is maintaining a supply of land for?
That's
We
last
talked
one.
about that.
You're talking about the GM one, which was, she said, oh yeah, no, that, I think that's just a cut and paste, because she said she approved of the GM3 policy.
Yeah. That's all.
Alrighty, everyone good? You want to run us through the rest of the agenda items real quick?
Sure. Let's last call online. Any other? We didn't miss a hand. Any other? Here, see, all good. Okay. So Elsa provided a memo on the flood control language and was that help with that was missing from the water resources chapter. I just wanted you guys to see it. I know Paul had said he wanted to feel reassured that we're working together and then it's a good collaborative relationship. So I guess we'll look at Paul and say, did the memo reassure you?
And there was an addition to that then.
Yeah, and there was a few sentences that you wanted to add.
Right, and I can just read that. We didn't send that out to you, but if you, I can read it. What we would suggest adding, because there was a study to reference. So it would say within the Flagstaff region, an updated JE Fuller hydrology study in the upper Flag watershed shows that a 21-acre wildfire would result in severe flooding through Fort Valley and Flagstaff. 130 million and 3.8 billion in impacts to homes, businesses, and public buildings. And then it goes on to say the board is strongly supportive of continued investment in forest restoration across all areas of the district, and that ties into the rest of the. Just to point out what that study identified in terms of one small fire.
Are there any questions about that? About the language?
I heard what you were reading, but I didn't catch the first part of it. I'm sorry. Could you say?
Okay, I'll read it again. And this is at the end of the memo that was sent to add that. It's kind of hard without, oh, you do have it up there? Okay, right there. She's got it right there.
This is just the new part that wasn't in the rest of the memo. It has,
Just that additional information about a study. And then the board's continued investment in forest restoration, which directly.
I could be the.
Parking lot.
Yes, parking lot rundown. This is also last call for parking lot ads. Hope we've done it all, but if there's been something burning on your mind that you think we might have missed, it is time.
I'm just gonna pull it up and then quickly go through a couple of things. If there's something else to add. The first item about wildfire preparedness, and we had that discussion at our last meeting about new technology. We did go back and talk amongst fire staff, and they gave us a strategy to add that. And I'm happy to share that text. I don't want to go into it right now, but if anyone's interested, I'm happy to share that over email, what the strategy says. Okay, so I have Rick, and
Anybody online want to see the wildfire technology statement?
Michelle and I probably. Did you say Tina? Cause yeah, I want that.
I appreciate that, Paul.
Restraint.
Restraint.
okay, moving down the list, just another note that we had the USGS webinar and the video is available to anyone who see it, who wasn't able to make it. Oh, Julie. We've incorporated comments from last meeting for the significant natural resources map and the parks and open space map. And like the rest of the document, they're going to go through a staff review where you see them in the full draft. For the last cap information, that has been delayed, and we're working on what the final language should be for that. So that will be in the full draft.
And it's not that the output's delayed, it's we haven't had time.
I was gonna say, I will totally
Summarize
go with that. I was
both of us.
supposed to write that and I did not.
It's a mental capacity for the week issue. We'll get to it, I swear.
There are two things in legals, which are the metrics in the water resource chapter and the urban growth boundary. The second page of the parking lot.
I talked about that a little.
Yes. The biomass items at the end of the parking lot. There's been a small group of us emailing back and forth about that. And we did have some language right now. If people who are involved have input, they should let us know on that. And then the food systems section is also through policy 86 that's being updated.
Yeah, I do have final updates for ED6, and it's really some additional implementation guidelines that are a result of the food systems. The comprehensive food system something report. I'm sorry, Natalie told me what it was earlier today and I forgot already. But this is the report we talked about at the time we were working on social and economic systems, and we added a few things based on that. If anybody wants to see that, any takers would like to see the other 3 implementation guidelines we added. Susie wants to see them, and Michelle, you're speaking on Michelle's behalf. Anybody online? Okay, good. It's a good set of changes. I like it. And then I'll talk about the call out box on energy transition. Jenny and Tom and staff sent me back and forth several things over the last few weeks. And it was quite the volume of material. And as I was looking through it, remembering our feedback that we wanted to make sure we're not repeating things in other documents or going into great depth on things that we can't make a land use issue. What my proposal is, and Tom and I haven't had a chance to talk about it since I sent you the email today, but is that there is a really core thing in there that Nicole Antonopoulos and I talked about, that emergency preparedness planning might need to take into consideration a switch to net zero in all electric buildings and what that means on getting households prepared for emergencies. So how do we get how do people's winter gear, like if you think of like in the summer, you take out the snow scraper and the extra blanket in your trunk and all of those things. And you put in, your grocery bag and maybe, a towel or whatever. But how do we get people to realize if your house infrastructure is changing, what you keep on hand in different situations in case of emergency might also need to change. So we're putting in a strategy about that. And then also making sure we're getting started at the end of this calendar year on the multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan, which Coconino County leads and all of us work together on. We had kind of our first meeting last week to kind of run through some things and answer questions for Tim, who's here with us a few meetings ago. And so we definitely want to take that conversation. So everything that we kind of switched back and forth, we can put in a save mode, and I can pass to Tim and say, here, Tim, here's a whole discussion about what this electrification might mean that we might need to update in those plans. So that's kind of the solution I'm offering.
Look at your email.
Yeah,
I didn't see it, I'm sorry.
That's okay, but I'm trying to at least find an approach that'll meet in the middle there, because I'm just not, it's hard to figure out what the underlying land use issues and all these things are. But it's more like it seems to me as I've been looking through it, it's more like there are land use changes that mean other changes also need to be considered. And we're not missing things by cutting off kind of the chain of cause and effect too soon in the document. Is that a good summary?
Sure. Right.
So that one takes a little more to explain. So go ahead, you got the rest of them, Elsa.
Yeah, well, I think that's the last one that. Yeah. So flood control was related to the memo.
Yep.
Yeah, so I guess if there are any last comments on things that need to be in the parking lot or need to be addressed ahead of our August meetings, this is the time.
Speak now, forever hold your peace.
Send me things after the meeting. I won't be answering email for the rest of the month. No kidding.
Public participation. Dennis, that's you.
Good, I'm just trying to learn.
To the end.
Thanks. Okay. What's up?
Yeah, so our next meeting is Tuesday, August 27th. We have 2 meetings that week. We have the 27th and the 29th. We will be getting you a whole plan, cover to cover, to look at. The hope is that the staff review ends on August 1st. So we have a few weeks to incorporate staff comments. Legal review might still be pending. And so but the majority of legal review will hopefully be done by the time it's in front of you on August 27th. I will try and find a way to show you what portions of the document might have pending work. Like we've talked about with the urban growth boundary. It's a heavily difficult topic from a legal perspective, so we've got to really make sure all the things we're talking about make sense and that it'll work. If we have any of those things that we're holding for that reason, I'll make sure there's a good explanation about it. But what we'll be looking for at the end of the 29th is a statement that you can endorse this as a public review draft. So what that means is that this draft is ready to go out for a 60-day public review, talking points, as Diane said, and engagement activities and outreach. And we're ready to get everybody else to the table here and get them up to speed and work on getting understanding around the document and hearing comments. So,
Did you say the date that we're gonna get it before the 27th?
yeah, we're gonna try and get it to you at least a week before if I can, more time if I can.
Comments at that point?
Yeah, but you'll have seen all these pieces.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. Yes, we can make continued edits. The hope, the hope is that as you're reading it cover to cover, you might see some things you didn't see. You're you have basically read the document in reverse order by looking at it chapter by chapter. And then we send you the whole document for review. You're kind of going to be looking at it in a different order. I think if we do that, everybody will see something that maybe you might see a gap or say, this isn't as clear, this belongs in another chapter, or we've got the wrong emphasis here. Those are all comments that, yeah, we will make changes between the committee review and the public review draft going out if there's, information that you think needs to be changing. Hopefully we're getting more refined in our comments, right? But it could be there's totally something that until you saw it all together, you couldn't have thought of.
Yeah.